Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today's cards feature products from Spellbinders' newest collection, Yana's Poppies. Poppy background is an A2 size press plate for the Better Press system that features negative design. When the plate is inked, the background will be pressed, leaving an inked background exposing the outline of the poppies and leaves. There you can see the plate sitting on the magnetic platform of the Better Press system. I'm rolling up some tape and placing it on the plate-in just inside those A2 registration marks. I'll be using the A2 size porcelain Better Press paper. And as you can see, the plate is oversized, so when it is pressed on the panel, it'll produce a nice edge-to-edge design. The covers were mixed up on my ink pads, but this plate is being inked with Better Press French Blue. The ink pads are smaller, so it does take a little bit of time, but these are slow-drying inks, so there's no worries. And applying the ink, I pounce down and then I do a little twisting motion right at the end. I find that the twist at the end just adds a little bit of pressure, helping to release the ink, covering the surface of the plate more consistently. And you definitely can see the kind of coverage that you're getting on your press plates. If I notice that there's any inconsistency or any modeling, I'll re-ink that area because it will show on the panel. And the metal corners on the plate-in are snapped onto the magnetic feet on the platform, and then as it is run through the die cutter, those feet will depress. So I didn't get the coverage that I had hoped for, so I've left everything exactly the way it is, and I'm going to go ahead and ink up the plate a second time. I found it kind of interesting. My other two panels are with inks that are much darker, and the darker inks I only had to apply the ink the one time. What I was expecting was that with the darker inks, I probably would have to ink them twice. But look at this vibrant blue that I got with the two applications of the ink, so I was quite happy with that. Because I was moving on to darker inks and there really wasn't any ink to speak of left on the plate, I just went ahead and inked it without cleaning the plate. And that was the mulberry ink, and you can see how consistent the result is after just one application of ink. And so for once I did have a plan. I started with the lighter inks, working towards the darker inks to avoid cleaning the plate in between applications. I do have the full-size black Better Press ink, and so this took no time at all to ink up. And like the mulberry, the one application resulted in a nice consistent background. I love that this press plate has a coordinating stencil set. This set is available as a bundle with the press plate. The stencil mat that I'm using has a sticky surface front and back, so it holds securely to the work surface as well as holding the panel in place. I'll be working with fresh dye inks and small blending brushes. First three stencils will color in the petals of the poppies. I'm working with 4 inks that are in a gradient from pink to red. For each of the stencils, I'll be applying 2 of the inks that are consecutive in this gradient. I'm working on the panel with the mulberry background. For this first stencil, I'll be using the 2 lightest inks. The darker of the 2, dusty pink, is placed at the base of each of the petals, finishing off with the lighter one, strawberry. Moving on to stencil 2, I'll use the dark tone from stencil 1, dusty pink, as the light tone, and for the dark tone I'll be using blush rose. The dusty pink is applied to the full petal. I'll then apply the dark tone blush rose to the base of the petals. The gradient of 4 inks are being used in a pattern as I move from stencil to stencil. For the third and final stencil to complete the petals, I'll be using the darkest tone from stencil 2, blush rose, and then finishing off with my darkest tone of all the 4 inks, raspberry sunset, at the base of each of the petals. If you're not 100% comfortable with coloring, stenciling really does level the playing field. This simple technique of applying the dark ink in the shadow areas and then finishing off with the lighter ink to create highlights really does give it a beautiful natural look. Stencil 4 will complete the leaves. Like the petals on the poppies, I'll be using 2 inks. I'll start off with my light tone, which is Silver Sage, and apply it to the full leaf. Jade, the darkest tone, will be placed at the base of each of the leaves. For Stencil 5, I'll be using the dark ink Jade to color in all of the stems. And the stenciling is wrapped up with Stencil 6 coloring the center of the flowers, and I'm going to be applying black ink. For the second panel, the one with the black background, I'll be using a combination of yellow and oranges. The inks that I'm using for the flower petals have been lined up in a gradient, starting with my lightest tone, which is Sunray, and then I'll apply chamomile at the base of the petal for Stencil 1. To prevent myself from getting mixed up, I've taken the Sunray and moved it off to the side. For Stencil 2, I'm now applying the chamomile to the full petal, and then Snapdragon, the next darker tone, will be applied to the base of the petals. And because I'm inking multiple panels, as I finish working with each stencil, I'm giving it a quick clean with a baby wipe. And with this second panel, I've developed a bit of a system that's working well. I've removed the lightest ink, which will not be used again, and so now I'm left with just 2 inks, the Snapdragon and Terracotta. Snapdragon, the darkest tone used on the previous stencil, will become my light tone for Stencil 3. And then the poppies are finished up with the dark tone Terracotta placed at the base of each of the petals. The leaves for this panel are being done with the light tone first, which is now the Jade, and then I'm going to finish up at the base of each of the leaves with a darker green ink called Eucalyptus. I'll continue with that dark green Eucalyptus to complete the stems. Knew that I'd be finishing up the 6th and final stencil for all 3 panels with the black ink, so I don't bother cleaning it in between applications. And that completes the panel with the black ink background. The third panel with the French blue ink background will be done in pink and purple tones. And I'll just quickly run through the inks that I'm using for this panel. First 3 stencils to complete the petals of the poppy, working lightest to darkest. I'll be applying pink crystal, mauve, berrylicious, and finishing up with the Acai berry. For anyone who is not a card maker, they would never guess that these poppies are colored so quickly and easily. I love the blended look on each petal and also the variation between the petal layers. For each of my poppies, I used a gradient of tones in one color family to color my poppies. It would be beautiful to do a panel with different colored poppies on it, or blend different colors on each of the petals, for example, yellows and pinks. And for another variation, you could skip the stencils altogether and watercolor or Copic color these poppies. For this panel with its blue background, I wanted to keep the leaves fairly neutral, so I'm using a combination of Evening Gray and Moonrock. And this came out a little bit darker than what I wanted, so then I took the white pigment ink and added in some highlights at the top of each of the leaves. The stems were completed with the dark gray Moonrock and then the centers of the flowers with black. And all the stenciling was complete. I just really felt that these had such a vintage feel to them, so I decided to go for it. And so all of the panels are going to be spattered using distressed tarnish brass. Applying spatter, I like to use a fan brush, and of course it gets absolutely everywhere. I'm working in a spatter box that I found years ago in my local craft store. It is collapsible, so it is quite handy to be able to tuck it away. But you know what? I've never seen it anywhere else. Mine is looking worse for wear. I want to replace it, but so far no luck. However, aside from looking bad, it does the job. These cards are going to have a simple sentiment on them. I chose the ones from Fresh Pick Sentiments. They are big and bold, and I think they're perfect for these backgrounds. The words hello, smile, and bloom were die cut from matte gold cardstock and also black sheet foam. I'm using the gold cardstock that is found in the Treasured Cardstock Gold collection. I haven't removed the foam die cuts from the foam, however I did pop out the centers of the letters. This will help when the cardstock words are aligned to the foam ones. Not applying a lot of pressure on the bottle of adhesive so that it comes out in thin streams. And I'm applying it like I'm handwriting, so it goes pretty quickly. Foam die cuts will be slightly recessed as compared to the rest of the foam, so this makes it very easy to align the cardstock ones to it. These are big chunky sentiments, so I could easily have aligned the foam without using this technique, but really it's a habit for me. This works particularly well with fine die cuts. For removing the excess foam, these are set aside to dry completely. The spatter is dry, and so I'm going to ramp up that vintage look with some gilded edging. Before starting, the panels were trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. Using a Versamark ink pad, the edges were rubbed with this clear, slow-drying ink. Place gold embossing powder in a coffee filter, and I'll just take each of the sides of the panels and dip them into the powder. And when I'm done, I'll take my heat tool, which is sitting in the background running so that it is at full temperature, and melt the embossing powder. With the hot air at full temperature, the powder melts quickly and there's minimal warping. The cards are adhered to A2 size black card bases. I love how this really makes that gold edging pop. Big and bold foam back sentiments are adhered to the right-hand corner of the card fronts. And that wraps up these cards featuring poppy background and the layered poppy background stencil set from Spellbinders Yana's Poppies collection. These are gorgeous products with lots of different possibilities. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I appreciate your visit.